keep that in.
That was just your test. That was just your test.
The thing is, whose mic did it come from? There was nobody.
He supplied it, denied it.
Are we on there? Oh, sorry. So, John, we got you back this summer, hence me wearing the glasses. I'll take them off in about 10 minutes when the joke's worn off.
Okay.
So I have got my summer shirt on, Charles. What do you think?
It's lovely, very simple.
Or Hawaii Five-0. It's sort of like that sort of movie.
Good, Miami Vice.
Who was he? Who was the Hawaii Five-0 guy?
Oh, Steve McGarrett.
No, you've gone too quick.
Danu.
No, he's the guy with the tash. The TV show.
Are you thinking Magnum PI?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was
Tom Selleck.
No, that was Magnum. That was Tom Selleck.
That's a different show. There's a different show with a different
era.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's my knowledge.
Well, it's there.
Right, so we're doing summer podcast, which is why I've got me summer blockbusters. Why I've got me summer shirt on and glasses while it's almost dark outside. But it was sunny when I got here. Right, so John, over to you. What we doing?
Well, it's summer movies. I figure we might as well celebrate them because this is another individual theme that I think it would be great to talk about because we talked about Oscars, we talked about Valentine's, we talked about Christmas.
It's the official start of summer now. You're here.
Yeah. So as I say, the summer era of blockbusters, it's been really interesting because I think summer movies do define our lives. I mean, they certainly have defined mine. I mean, my first summer of movie going was 1977. I was 8 years old.
Oh, that was the year I was born. That's all I know about my birthday.
Now, what was released in 1977?
Well, funnily enough,
Elvis died.
Well, it was the time of the old Doug McClure prehistoric epics like The Land That Time Forgot and Warlords of Atlantis and At the Earth's Core. That At the Earth's Core was 1976. But for me, it is defined by three movies. One of which I'll be talking about is one of them was The Rescuers, 1977, which is the Disney animated movie, which is one of several animated films from the 70s that came out at the time. And the other two was a double bill of Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, and the theatrical version of Spider-Man. Nicholas Hammond. It was the TV show from 1977.
Is that the TV pilot?
Yeah, the TV show, which was more Kenny Everett than Marvel, but it was. But I mean, we lapped it up. I mean, I remember we watched Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger first, and then Spider-Man came on. It was quite novel seeing how this character came on because it was also Batman when Batman was more like the camp version, like the Adam West version, where they'd always do a bit of tricking where they go up a building, but of course it was the camera was.
It's on its side, yeah.
But the Sinbad film, was that the one with the Pegasus, or what was the horse?
Well, it's got the Minotaur, and it was and there was like skeleton stuff, but it also featured Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca in Star Wars. He actually played Minotaur in it. It was his first film because he was a hospital orderly at the time.
Oh yeah,
he was a hospital orderly at the time, and he used between doing the wards, he actually became an actor.
Oh,
And then basically George Lucas, so the legend goes, he went into an audition and George Lucas said, stand up. And he stood up and he said, right, he's our Chewbacca.
Oh, he's just a big dude, is he?
Yeah, he's six. Well, he's just died recently, but he was about 6'7" or 7'2", I think.
I think it was, pushing 7'7", yeah.
But no, I mean, summer movies, it's sort of, what does it mean? It means like, the summer holidays, you'd sort of go, you finish in July and then, and then your parents they'd either give you pocket money to go and watch your local movie or you go with your family to watch, a movie in the holidays. I mean, I remember going to see the double bill of Spy Love Me and Pink Panther Strikes Again just before I went to, in 1980, we went on a holiday to ride in the Isle of Wight. And we went the night before. We went to this local cinema and watched like Spy Love Me and The Pink Panther Strikes Again. And it was back in the days when double bills were quite a thing. And also the poster actually is a mimicry. You had Roger Moore and the Pink Panther back to back.
Oh, okay.
Goes like double the thing, but.
Do the James Bonds always release at the same time of year, or were they all different?
They were funny enough, from 1973 to 1989, they were summer films. But then, funny enough, the release date especially the latest one, the latest one's not going to be a summer film. It's April 2020 is the latest release date for the new Bond. But for a while, up until 1989, they were traditionally summer movies. So everything from the Roger Moore, from Live and Let Die to License to Kill was a summer release. And then the thing is with the whole release slate is that because of piracy, films are normally released on the same day. Like films like Con Air, for example, there was a worldwide release date of June the 6th. So because to get as many films out as possible because of piracy, they would release them on the same day. In 1977, for example, Star Wars was released on May the 25th in 32 screens. But because the studio wasn't sure how well it was going to do, they could only book it in 32 screens. It then grew in word of mouth, set house records on its first week, and then became such. And so in New Zealand and the UK, for example, it was a Christmas release, but it became such a big thing that word of mouth built so much. You know, the blockbuster era was done because of Jaws in 1975, because Sid Sheinberg, who was the president of Universal, who's recently died, he actually decided to do an incredible campaign for it. So it was the first time where they used, TV and newspaper cuttings. I mean, they spent some like $4 million at the time on actually doing this wide thing. Yeah. And there was about 480 prints at the time.
What's the Avengers? Did that break the opening thing? It was going for the most money taken in the first weekend or something. Did it break it?
It was expected. I mean, the industry literally, when it bowed in May or April, it was literally people weren't even gonna. Nobody even began to question it. It was just literally that's how big it was because. Yeah. The pre-sale tickets when they went on sale was was off the radar.
Right, okay.
It's now, I mean, it's taken 2.1 billion, I think, according from what I saw in the Hollywood Reporter.
Yeah. I think I think currently it's about 40 million off Avatar, which is the highest grossing film ever.
Oh, that's okay. And who's third? Who would be third?
I can't remember. I know that all four Avengers films are in the top four.
Yeah.
And Black Panther, like number 2.
I think Star Wars The Force Awakens.
Oh, it's Force Awakens.
And I think Star Wars The Last Jedi. I think the latest ones have done. I think the Fast and Furious 6 or Fast and Furious.
One of them is up there. Yeah.
One of them, I mean, Fast and Furious 6 took over $1 billion. It's
hell.
Vin Diesel is, I'm in on the wrong job. Vin Diesel is making too much money.
He's unstoppable.
Well, he's unstoppable. Yeah. How many cars can you see wheel spin? What's the story? Am I missing something?
It started out, Paul Walker is a cop who goes undercover about street racing. It's illegal street racing, and that's the whole thing that started.
Yeah.
But as the time's gone on, Paul Walker then goes to the other side, and then as it cans, there becomes like I think Luke Wilson, what's the Welsh guy? The actor. There's Jason Statham and Luke. What's the surname? Luke. But the Welsh actor who's kind of he kind of goes on a revenge thing, and there's Michelle Rodriguez, and it becomes like a. They've somehow created a story arc out of a movie that was very, very simple.
That's the thing. The first couple of films were quite forgettable. I mean, they were perfectly fine, but there was I saw them and I was like, okay, I don't really get it. Like I saw them later, after they,
But then from the fourth or fifth one onwards, they actually did they did a film called Fast and Furious, which was again they'd sort of taken the whole concept and then they just made it bigger. And then from then on, it became the law of increasing returns.
Yeah, they steered into the stupid. I feel like they were like, this is dumb, this is silly, and we're just going to go for it. We're going to ramp it up, make it sillier, make it more stupid.
Like Trump.
It works.
It's on every podcast to mention Trump, but yeah. So Summer Blockbusters. So what we got then?
Okay, so this is my top 10.
In order?
In reverse order, because I kind of feel that these are. These kind of represent what I feel are the top 10 memories of my last. So it's based on from 1975.
Right.
We've talked about my first choice is my number 10 choice because it was the first one that I ever saw and remembered is The Rescuers, which the animated Disney film, which
was mice.
Yeah, it's about mice. It's about like a rescue society of mice who work under the United Nations, and they seriously, and they basically this message in a bottle is intercepted from this orphan girl called Penny, who is being held hostage by this evil lady called Madame Medusa.
Yeah.
And her assistant Snoops, and she wants to get. There's a cave where there's a diamond called the Devil's Eye.
Yeah.
And they fly from New York. The mice go from New York to Devil's Bayou, which is probably in Tennessee or somewhere like that. And they have lots of adventures. There's a group of swamp mice in there, and it's battles, and it's just, you know.
So do the human beings know there are mice?
It's kind of a weird one. Disney would always use animals as they do in all the things. If you think of all the movies like Robin Hood and the Jungle Book, it's like that mix of.
I was just wondering if it was like Tom and Jerry. You only saw from the ankle up, just sort of they were running between people's legs and things.
Well, in The Rescuers, the humans are in tangent with the, you know,
okay,
Penny is like the kid who kind of is to evoke the audience's sympathy.
Right. Okay.
And she and there's a few songs in there which, funny enough, were co-written by the same people who wrote the theme for Rocky. Gonna Fly Now.
Awesome.
So Carol Connors and Aim Robbins worked with Sammy Fain, and they also wrote the theme with Bill Conti for Gonna Fly Now.
Oh, okay.
So, but there's songs like The Rescue, Someone's Waiting for You. At the time that you could also buy, there was no video, but you could also buy these Rescuer storybooks, so you could actually listen to an abridged version of the story, and there'd be like clips from the thing. It was also available in there were a few scenes like on Super 8. We actually had Albatross Airlines, so they would have like 8-minute extracts. So they did a special in the time. Super 8 was like the home entertainment. So VHS came in 1980. From 1965 to 1980, Super 8 was the way that you could watch movies, and you'd watch them in reels. So you'd watch, we actually rented a 54-minute version of Escape from Alcatraz. And
you rented the reel?
You rented the reels.
Oh,
there's a company in Dudley.
How careful would you have to be with that, though?
Well, if you looked after it, you'd and I remember we rented extracts of Star Wars, and we've actually got in our family collection, we've got an 18-minute abridged version of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So it
Really? 18 minutes?
Yeah.
Wow.
And actually, I saw an edited version of The Exorcist, which was a 50. Warner Brothers did 2 versions, so it was like 3 reels, about 18 minutes each, and it was all pretty much. It didn't include things like the opening Iraq sequence, but it included all the key sequences. Right. And then Superman the movie had a lot of the key sequences. They did one for Star Wars, which was actually certain scenes, selected scenes from the opening through to the TIE Fighter attack on the Millennium Falcon. So there was one, and then they also did a company called Marcus Film Corporation released a special extended promo of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which I discovered on YouTube recently. And it's a 12-minute extract which they showed to exhibitors. There's a thing called Show West where they show all the upcoming films. Titanic, for example, they did the 5-minute trailer of Titanic, which was
5 minutes,
which was because at the time in 1997, everybody thought it was going to be a flop, and then Paramount and Fox put together this 5-minute trailer to show exhibitors, and everybody burst into applause. So these were essentially, going back to what we're talking about, these were like special extracts you could get. And, it was quite nice. I mean, we watched them religiously. So,
where did you get the reel from? Where were you renting these from?
There was a company that's no longer available. It's a company called Deram Film Services, and they actually were the number one library for Super 8 films in the UK. They actually did a special deal with Spielberg to do a special 20-minute reel of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which they released through Paramount, which was specially edited by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. And there was a whole host of them. And, you could rent, for about, say, £5 for a few days, like a week. You could watch.
Can you remember who was before Blockbuster? Like, who was the go-to? Was there, or just loads
Well,
of small
before
ones?
Blockbusters, it was just video libraries at your local
Small
garage.
Ones. Yeah,
you could. I mean, because what it was most of the shop owners, they saw something to make more money.
Oh, so they could.
For example, so between the food and the drink and stuff.
I remember, yeah.
And but there were actually dedicated video libraries, which whole shelves of stuff, and you could watch, and of course there was no regulation before 1994, so you used to go in there and you go in there with your dad and you rent a couple of films on like on a Saturday night, something like The Evil Dead or Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
But what do you mean there was no regulation before 1994?
1984. Well, it was just unregulated. There was the Video Recordings Act came in 1984.
The classifications?
Yeah.
Oh.
There was literally no
Really?
classifications, yeah. And a couple of films were banned back then.
Well, there was a thing called the Director of Public Prosecutions list, and then Mary Whitehouse, for example, she got involved, and then there was a famous headline on the Daily Mail: "Ban this video filth," because things like Driller Killer, the video nasties trailer,
Cannibal Holocaust,
and I mean nowadays the funny thing is when you go into before HMV closed, if you go into FOP or something, you go in there now and it actually looks like a video library of 1980s.
Really? Yeah.
Because everybody, but it's all legal now. But it's nice. I mean, at the time it was quite nice because a lot of these movies were, for us, my generation or for our generation, it was great because we didn't turn us into zombies, but it was quite nice to see all these movies that we couldn't get in to see when we were because we were underage.
Yeah.
And I think when you're 13 and 14, it's a rite of passage. You want to watch a movie that is there anyway. So
go on, Burrows. We got that. No, not Burrows.
The Rescuers. Okay, so that's number 10. So getting back on track, my number 9 choice is Splash.
Oh, really?
1984, which is a Ron Howard movie starring Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks.
Oh, it's Ron Howard. Was that one of his earlier films?
Yeah, it was his second directorial film. He did a film called Night Shift in 1982, which with Henry Winkler, and it was Michael Keaton's big screen debut.
Henry Winkler's in The Fonz.
Yeah, Henry Winkler.
So stuck with him. And
so Splash is actually a story of a businessman called Alan Bauer, played by Tom Hanks.
Oh, yeah.
And he basically, as a kid, he goes on a family trip to Cape Cod, falls over the side, and meets a young girl, a mermaid girl.
Yeah.
A mermaid girl.
Lady Mermaid.
Lady Mermaid. So, in a nutshell, later on, he's now an adult businessman working in fruit and veg, and basically his wife has left him, and he decides to go off to Cape Cod, and the same thing again. He meets the mermaid.
He falls in accident. Did she save him again?
She saves him again.
She thinks, "Oh Christ!"
So basically, he loses his wallet,
okay.
and then she emerges He emerges at the Statue of Liberty totally naked and ends up taken to the police officer station. And then Tom Hanks goes and rescues her, and then it becomes like their actual adventure. And then his brother Freddie, who's played by John Candy, who's very
forgot his name.
But then there's also this sleazy scientist who's played by Eugene Levy, who played Jim's dad in American Pie. Well, in this movie, he's determined to discover that this thing's in. So it's very, very funny. Daryl Hannah's lovely in it, and there's some really funny moments. There's a great sequence involving lobster There's a funny sequence involving lobster in a restaurant, and there's a scene where she's in a TV store, and he says he goes, "What's your name?" He goes, "Well, it's very difficult to say in English." So he goes, "Okay, do it." And then she does this screeching, and then all the TVs explode. So that's it was actually one of the first films that Touchstone Pictures did. It was it was where they changed, because it was the more adult label.
Right. So
films like Down and Out in Beverly Hills, Outrageous Fortune, Stakeout, Deadly Pursuit, Shoot to Kill, Deadly Pursuit, The Help, Con Air, a lot of the movies, because Disney, it was one of those things. They went from the children's thing, because that Disney wanted to get into more grown up fare and more mature fare. So that's that's my number 9.
Okay. No, it's a very sweet film, isn't it? It's a good solid.
Okay, so number 8. Well, we've got to have a bit of Arnie in this, but it's not Terminator. It is Total Recall, the original Total Recall from 1990, which is, I think, for my money, his best film ever. Paul Verhoeven directed. It's based on a Philip K. Dick novel called a short story called We Can Remember It For You Wholesale.
Oh, right.
The story is
lots of squibs in that movie.
Yes, it's Paul Verhoeven.
Lots of flaring arms.
It's Paul Verhoeven, but I think it's such a great story because it's a mystery and it's like because you have to think about it, and it's like the strange thing about it is it does make you think about, does the story work? Because where the fact that this guy's haunted by dreams of Mars, and then he realizes that he's actually, he goes to this thing called recall, which brings up memories.
Yeah, I remember rewatching it, going, right up to that point, was he like he was human then? But then was it after that they started arguing about he's gone mad and to inject him? And
it's like, for example, they given him, the actual job was real, but everything else was fake. They got Sharon Stone as the agent who played his wife. And then he has memories of Rachel Chicotin, the girl that he meets, Melina on Mars.
So you're saying it was what he paid for, or not?
No,
an educated film reviewer, what are you saying it is?
It was what had happened was the injection that he'd had at the actual recall thing.
So he went there genuinely,
and basically there would been a reaction to show that he all the stuff like him being a secret agent. He was a secret agent. He wasn't a construction worker. So
right,
course,
so all of that was fake.
Yeah, but he's in fact a secret agent.
So basically, the whole film.
Yeah.
Was the journey?
Yeah.
Okay. So there was no trans. Okay.
No, but I just think it's a very clever. The sets are great and there's some great effects in it and the gore's great and and I think the first chase where he's being pursued by the agents and they shoot that guy and he's using the thing as a human.
Just that poor random
Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah.
But it's such Verhoeven, apparently he was influenced by the Second World War and he'd see a lot of gore, so that's why a lot of that stuff.
It's like PTSD, his career.
Yeah, a bit of graphics.
Pretty much, yeah, sort of reliving these sort of Nazi traumas.
But going back to what we're talking about, it's just it sort of encompassed. It was an adolescent blockbuster for adults. It was just there was so much action in it, and I just remember seeing it in a packed house and everybody cheering and that kind of real, true communal cheering that you get when you get a real, genuine good movie. Anyway,
well, because it's just so over. Like with
Verhoeven
at its best, it's so over the top. It just becomes its own thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's number 8. Now, number 7, I've actually done. There is a bit of a tie here because I've actually not so much picked a summer movie as a specific summer.
Oh yeah,
and
isn't that cheating a little bit?
No, but the funny thing is when I was thinking about this, I just kind of feel that, as I say, I did say beforehand it was more summer memories, but I think every single one of the movies here is kind of brings back a specific thing and. Unashamedly, I'm going to bring up the summer of 1982, the actual summer of Star Trek 2 and The Thing and Poltergeist, Rocky 3, Firefox, Tron and Mad Max 2. If I was going to pick one, it would be The Thing. The John Carpenter film would be the one that I would pick.
Was that 1982?
Yep.
So, and those films you read out, they weren't all 1982.
They were.
Say them again.
Star Trek 2, The Thing, Poltergeist, Rocky 3, Firefox, Tron, Mad Max 2, Blade Runner.
Of course,
they were all released within a few months of each other between May and 19. I mean that it's been regarded, and even most people have regarded it as the greatest summer of cinema going. And I'd be inclined to agree because Star Trek 2 is one of the best sequels. Rocky 3 is one of the most popular things. I mean, if I would also pick Rocky 3 as that was a film I saw in the summer of 82.
Yeah, you like that film?
Yeah.
Any reason? Any sort of...
I hadn't seen I actually saw Rocky 1 and Rocky 2 beforehand, and I was only talked into it by some friends in the street. But all I will say is, I don't think if you and I had been in that screening, I think you would never have taken me to a movie again because I was actually cheering like crazy.
But because of your age, was it really the first Rocky film that you saw properly, or did you?
Yeah, it was the first. It was the first. I mean, I hadn't
that
seen.
you understood. I mean,
no. I mean, Rocky. It was good entertainment. I mean, you didn't really need to see the previous.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is, because if you'd seen the first two, you wouldn't think the third was a great one. I was thinking, was that the first time as an adult you sort of knew what you were seeing?
It was great fun. I mean,
Yeah.
it's got Clubber Lang, Mr. T. I pity the fool, and
He's great in that.
So was this before 18? Or what?
This was before. This was just before 18.
Oh, so he wasn't Mr. T.
No, he was Mr. T in Rocky 3. But then he did B.A.
Then went on to
then he went on to do B.A.
right. I thought
Baraka.
it was the other way
He was
around.
born Mr. T.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's got his real name's like Lawrence Turman. Lawrence. He's named. I know he's, and he became really. He was an icon,
Right.
And I think in terms of. And it also features Hulk Hogan as Thunderlips,
Yes, he made their careers. Yeah,
Yeah.
Because his theme tune was "Eye of the Tiger," wasn't it? Hulk Hogan,
Survivor. It was, that was, that really was part of the reason that was another of the singles that I bought. I actually bought that single.
Oh, really?
And it actually was one of the, going back to what we were talking about before, that was one of the first soundtracks I got, which was Rocky 3.
Right.
And I actually bought, my parents got me Star Trek 2 and the Rocky 3 as my Christmas presents for Christmas 82.
Oh.
I played those.
How many times did you watch it? Yeah, listen to that. But who did the soundtracks for the Rockies? I think we mentioned
Bill Conti.
And how many did he do?
He did all of them.
Yeah? Oh.
Yeah, from Rocky. No, he didn't
Not
do
up to Rocky Balboa.
No, he did. No, he did. Yeah, he did Rocky Balboa.
Yeah.
He did all six, the first six.
Damn,
And it was, again, that sort of was, I think I saw it in August of 1982 with a whole bunch of people at my local cinema. And I had a few people looking at me weirdly off because I was cheering like it was a real boxing match.
Go on, Rocky! Go on, Rocky!
Get up, get up.
Come on, Rocky! And everybody's, and the whole cinema was turning around. What the fuck is he doing? So
that was a wonderful summer for you. That one.
So I would say if I was going to pick one out of the Summer '82 slate, so I think it would either be The Thing or Rocky 3. So
what you going? What you going for out of that, Charles?
The Thing.
The Thing. Yeah, come on.
Okay.
I mean, The Thing is.
Oh, hang on. So that's quite hot. So that was released in the summer.
Yeah.
The Thing.
Well, it was released in America in the summer, but we got it in the autumn. But I kind of feel
Summer
that it,
movie, The Thing.
yeah. But
Who did it get overshadowed by? It wasn't
E.T.
E.T. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it came out 3 weeks before. It came out 2 weeks after E.T. And because Spielberg, when it opened, they wanted Carpenter said they needed an uplifting cry because E.T. was an uplifting film about an alien, and then you had The Thing, which was about this thing that was going to destroy the world.
Right. So yeah.
So it's like at the time, audiences didn't want a malevolent thing that could get inside your system and sort of rip your heart open.
Yeah.
It's not a film for everyone. I mean, I think it's a fantastic film. It's not a film for everyone. You know what I mean?
It can't. Well, you have to. The more I watch it now, I mean, I think it's my favourite horror film of the 80s. I think bar none. I think it just works
It's
so
right up there. If you watch it again, when was the last time you see it?
a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay.
But it's also the fact that it's, in terms of, the physical effects by Rob Bottin and the idea at the heart of it, the fact that it's an intelligent science fiction film.
Yes.
I
And
was watching something about them recently, and the director said the production had to pay for 2 weeks for them to just be there together and work on the script together because he wanted that sort of Howard Hawks where they were talking over each other. They wanted the natural thing. So for 2 weeks, they did nothing other than just piss about at the location because he wanted them all to have that sort of feeling that they'd been there for so long.
But they shot at a location in a town called Stewart, British Columbia, and so the story goes is a lot of these cast members were taking a shine to the local women, and the local men were not really pleased. So there was a few fistfights apparently. But again, that was they kind of built this really interesting. When they built the set, it was when they started it. It was like on the snow hadn't arrived, and then the snow grew, and then it became like the Antarctic set. Anyway.
Right, I see.
So that to me is so there's that one.
So those special effects from 1982, man,
Yeah.
that's good.
Okay.
Careful.
So, Number 6. This was a summer film in 1985 in the States, but I've got to include it, and that's Back to the Future.
Oh, right, yeah.
I managed to see that in the cinema. They had a re-release a while ago, about 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I managed to catch that in the cinema, and it's probably one of the best films I've seen in the cinema, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
You saw it again on the re-release?
Yeah, they had a re-release.
Did they do anything new to it?
No.
No, they've done. I mean, I think it was a movie that was released without fanfare in the States, but it's just one of those that when I saw it at the cinema, it's one of those like Total Recall. It's a movie that just genuinely is an audience crowd pleaser. I mean, everything, the chemistry's great. The implausibility of whether a DeLorean can actually sort of travel through time, but the science fiction, the idea, it's a real nice plot point, and it does have some really fun moments. And again, it's a very thought-provoking thing about, well, what would happen if you met your parents, and would you be able to do the time continuum?
Yeah, there's a thin subplot of incest running.
Well, thin. It's quite strong, really. Yeah.
But it also has one of my favorite lines in it is the one where Joey he discovers his uncle as a baby, and he goes and he's in prison. He goes,
He's standing,
and he goes, this is Joey. He goes, so you're my Uncle Joey. Better get used to these bars.
Because he's in their crib, isn't he?
Yeah. He said, and then the mother says, oh, well, he's always crying. So when we take him out, he's always crying. So we just leave him in there.
Leave him in there, yeah.
But there's a lot of, and I mean, it has one of the greatest theme songs of all time, Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News. Actually beat Rambo First Blood Part 2, which was the blockbuster in 1985 in the States. It actually beat, Michael J. Fox's The Pint-Sized Hero, beat Rambo.
The Pint-Sized Hero.
Certainly aged better as well than Rambo First Blood.
But Rambo First Blood Part 2 was, it was fun, but I mean, nobody really took it seriously.
Yeah.
But it was, I loved it for the script, and I loved it for the, they, again, it had a troubled production. Eric Stoltz, who was the original Marty, he basically, they had to recast it because Eric Stoltz wasn't necessarily hitting the right notes with the thing. So when they screened early dailies, they said, well, everybody else is good, but Eric Stoltz is not hitting the comedy. So what they did was they got on the horn to Gary David Goldberg, or Spielberg got on the horn to Gary David Goldberg for Family Ties and said, look, we want Michael J. Fox to do it. He said, well, that's fine, but you're going to have to work around us. And because Meredith Baxter Burney, who was the mother in Family Ties, had just got pregnant, and they said, no, we want Michael J. Fox to do it. So he actually did the TV series, then worked overnight to do the sequences.
Oh, okay.
And it proved to be an apt choice. So so that's my next choice.
Okay.
So number 5, well, I've got to include this, and it is Grease, 1978.
Grease. Well,
fair enough. Yeah, Beauty School Dropout is a great song.
But it's like because it was, for me, I always remember when the film arrived, and it seemed to me you could not watch Top of the Pops without a Grease song playing. They must have played everything from Summer Nights to, You're the One That I Want was one of the biggest hits of 1978. I mean, the amount of times it would hit number 1, and they'd always play the climactic scene from, it's a weird spoiler because it's actually that they played like the final sequence of John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John sort of singing "You're the One That I Want" because that was the only video they had. And they played Sandy, they played Summer Nights, they played Grease Lightning, Hopelessly Devoted to You. I think Frankie Valli Grease. that was funny enough, Frankie Valli's Grease was actually the one thing which was actually taken from a TV show, which was written by the Bee Gees. Barry, they wrote, Grease was written by Barry Gibb.
What? As the
Bee Gees, because the Bee Gees wrote a lot of songs. Like because they were coming off Saturday Night Fever. Travolta was coming off Saturday Night Fever. Oh. He was contracted to do Grease as his next film. And then, and then Barry Gibb wrote Grease, which I think is a great, I love that song.
And you enjoyed the film other than the music? Is there a good...
I think it holds up, it holds up remarkably well. I think it works well as I prefer it to Dirty Dancing, which was a summer film in 1987, but it works. I think it's a movie I love for the chemistry between John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John is great. is a great teaming. I also like Stockard. I like the Rizzo and Kaneki and the other characters, after it. And it is so kind of unique and got such a great look. And it's kind of the school you want to go to, and you want to date a pink lady, It's like I want to be a T-bird,
It's but and it's a good. I think it's a very good adaptation of a musical.
Yeah,
was it? Yeah, it wasn't a musical.
It was in that. Yeah, Jim Jacobs, Jim Jacobs and Warren Casey, who wrote the original stage version.
So that was it was a stage.
It started out. Funnily enough, Grease was actually a bit of a low key stage show when it started. It's a bit like Rocky Horror, the Rocky Horror Show, which was the hot ticket at the time. I mean, and basically it evolved on off Broadway and then Broadway, and then it became Robert Stigwood secured the rights. Richard Gere played Danny on Broadway. He was actually in the stage show, but Travolta was the first choice for the stage show, and then he became the first choice for the musical.
Of course, yeah.
But it's the songs are so, it's a musical that works both on the big screen, and it's kind of, when you compare it to things like West Side Story, and when you look at the evolution of the musical from the 50s MGM ones to to West Side Story, to things like Hello Dolly, it has such a great energy to it. I mean, The Greatest Showman is this generation's Grease. I mean, they do a sing along at the Prince Charles, but it's such a summer movie. For me, it's like right from the outset where they're on the beach and they're in the Rydell High, and there's that. It's such a colourful and colourful thing, and in the high school. And he also talks about the end of the term. Everybody's sort of. It's like the very last,
right? Yeah.
And they're coming back from the summer as well. So there's such a summery theme about it because it's the beginning of the next term.
You're watching their whole summer play out.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
And and it's a summer romance. It's Danny and Sandy is like another of these great romances anyway. So
right, yeah. So Grease.
I was going to say, it's a good adaptation of it's a good film of a musical.
Right, okay,
because I was thinking like Les Mis.
Yeah,
I didn't think worked as a film, and I didn't particularly like. I didn't feel that it was
my biggest
cinematic.
Yeah, my biggest problem with Les Miserables is Tom Hooper did not stage it cinematically.
That's what I'm trying to say.
The problem is that he had all these. I'm sure you picked up on it as well. But the funny thing is that you'd have all these great sequences, or you'd have these spectacle sequences, but he had a habit of leaving the camera where it was. So the visual effects, like some of the CGI stuff, it would be like there's a sequence where Hugh Jackman and Russell Crowe pulling. They're in the water pulling it.
Yeah.
But he didn't move the camera enough. And it was a very strange.
So it didn't have a large feel to the film.
And it was so long. It was like I just remember saying, and it just isn't moving for me. It was an odd. It was very odd for something that is something that is designed to be very cinematic and an eagerly anticipated thing. If you look at like The Greatest Showman and Grease, the camera moves. There's the sequences when you look at. Like West Side Story, for example. From the very outset, the opening shots of West Side Story are of bird's eye shots of New York. And the camera's constantly moving around. And then the camera moves into the to the riffs and the jets downstairs.
Right, okay.
In Greece, for example, you open with this spectacular shot of, on the beach, and it's just shots of the ocean. The Greatest Showman, for example, again, is very cinematic. With Les Miserables, it's like you're watching a stage play.
Right. You're watching a big budget stage play.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a film.
A lot of people, don't get me wrong, we're not arguing, because a lot of people liked it, and Les Miserables is one of the most successful musicals of all time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't cinematic.
So Charles Kirby, 2 thumbs down for Les Mis, the movie.
It didn't work for me. I sort of sat through it. I think I bought it for my mum on DVD. We watched it one Christmas, and I was just like...
Are you sure it wasn't given to you and you just passed on the present?
Maybe. I somehow acquired it. I don't know where it came from.
Okay, so we're into my top 4 now.
Ooh, there we go.
So...
Getting serious
Yeah,
now.
no more stocking fillers. This is the...
Well, I've sort of used these as pointers, and I think rather than sort of pick them as a joint fourth, I'm going to pick The Empire Strikes Back.
Right, so we're on to Star Wars. Now, where does this come in the sort of pantheon of Star Wars films? Is this the
It
first
is the
one?
second film.
Second
of
film.
Episode 7, if you go.
19. Well, it's...
Is this the one with the thing on 4 legs?
Yeah.
The toy,
It was
yeah.
with Hoth and Yoda and I'm Your
Is
Father.
this the first appearance of Yoda, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it was... I saw it on opening day 1980. It was, you know, I mean, the sheer excitement of watching it was palpable.
So how many years between the first and this one?
3.
Oh, just 3, okay.
3.
Imagine that nowadays. I mean, that's it's crazy.
I remember seeing the Vivaldi teaser, as it's become known, before the Black Hole. They showed there was a 2-minute trailer, which is on YouTube, which is brilliant, which is, it goes, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, Leia and the princess's, Luke, Han's and the princess story did not end at the end of the destruction of the Death Star. It continues in The Empire Strikes Back, and they had a lot of these great sequences. They still hadn't finished the effects. But today, funny enough, although everybody regards it as the greatest Star Wars film, there was a hint of a disappointment when it first came out in 1980. A lot of people didn't rate it as much as the original. There was a little
the character or the...
It's a different
It's
tone,
a different
isn't it?
film.
Yeah.
It's got a different
it's
tone,
too
but
different,
it's
okay.
like because we'd had this wonderful experience in 1977, 78, watching Luke and this kind of real great adventure, which was escapism, and then they went left field with it because it was like the whole thing of making it more grown up with Luke, Han and Leia's thing, and then of course this much more darker story going on, and then of course that revelation. The revelation at the end.
I'm curious. Watching it first time, was that shocking? Because I sort of grew up, and before I saw the film, I sort of had heard it.
It was no, seriously. When I was in the cinema, I mean, actually, just before then, Vader had chopped Luke's hand off. That's the funny thing. Now this film was suitable for all. It was a use certificate, it was such a. We were kind of like when he says, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to... And also that scene, because Luke is hanging on for dear life on that like...
Gangway or
whatever. That platform.
Yeah.
And he's about to... And he's sort of laying on there. And it's such a genuine cliffhanger. And then, of course, he goes, come with me. And then he drops off. And it's like... And then, there was debate about, whoa, did he really say that? It's such a powerful, it's such a powerful statement as a movie per se. And nowadays, I mean, it's a wonderful. I mean, it's nowadays I'm inclined to agree with anybody who thinks it's a real science fiction epic. I think it is one of the best Star Wars films compared to actually with the later ones, for example. I think it is up there as one of the best. I mean, I would put Star Wars, Empire, Revenge of the Sith, and The Force Awakens as the 4 that do.
Is it true that he doesn't actually say the words "I am your father," Luke?
He does, but
he
no.
Does say
when
it
it goes, "No, Luke, I am your father."
Oh, okay.
But when they filmed it, the story goes, and as Mark Hamill said when he was on Graham Norton promoting last year, he goes, this is what it was shot like. I'm going to tell you the truth. Obi-Wan killed your father. But before they filmed the main thing, he goes, he said, like, Irving Kershner went to him, director, and said, right, we're going to tell you something now. And he had the piece of paper. And he says, George knows it. I know it. George knows it. I know it. And we're going to tell you. So if it leaks, we know it was you.
Oh, that's so
and
cool.
then they opened the paper and it said, "Luke, I am your father."
Oh, right.
So it was very much. It kind of is, for me. It's the singular most shocking moment in Star Wars history, without question. And I think it's cool anyway. So that's my number 4.
So what's better than this? So we got Star Trek. I thought that would have been your top ones.
Okay, so
Star Wars. Star Wars.
yeah. So
What did I say?
Not Trek.
okay. So we've already talked about Bond Summer. So I'm gonna at number 3. I'm going to be picking The Spy Who Loved Me,
Oh, okay.
the 1977 Bond, which for me is I think was one of the first. I mentioned it already that I did see it in 1980, but I think it's Roger Moore's best Bond movie.
So which one is this now? What's the story here?
The story is 2 nuclear submarines, one Russian, one British.
Jaws. This one.
Jaws, yeah.
Okay.
It was
It's a submarine one.
yeah. So Bond basically teams up with Triple X, played by Barbara Brack, to find out why these submarines have gone missing. It's effectively a reworking of You Only Live Twice.
Okay.
Rather than spacecraft, it's actually submarines. Because I think I mentioned this, the original book is actually a very weird one because it's about a woman. The main protagonist is a woman in the Canadian mountains, and Bond is a sub-character.
Okay.
Didn't turn up later. The book itself it's actually one of the lesser James Bond novels. And Ian Fleming gave Broccoli and Saltzman the time to write. Said, well, you can use the title, but you can't use the book. It's an odd one. It's not really a great. It's a very odd. I think he takes on gangsters. 2 gangsters are after this woman, and that's why it's called The Spy Who Loved Me, because it's about this woman who Bond saves.
But she's the protagonist. So
yeah, she's the lead protagonist. So it's a very strange book. It's not. There's no gadgets. There's no Blofeld or anything. It was something that Fleming wrote as an afterthought. It's also Spy Who Loved Me is also the first film where Cubby Broccoli was sole producer, because Harry Saltzman had got into trouble and he'd sold the rights to Albert Broccoli for to do it, and also because of the troubles, because Man with the Golden Gun had not done all that well, he wanted to make this one spectacular.
Okay.
So thanks to ski jumper Rick Sylvester, he created one of the greatest opening sequences ever, where he went to Baffin Island to shoot this thing. And again, Prince Charles, when they completed it and it was edited, Prince Charles saw it twice at the Pinewood Studios. It was extraordinary.
So that's not the Bond that opens up when the flag on the parachute.
Yeah.
Oh, it is that
yeah.
one. Where was that shot?
It was shot
in Ireland.
It was shot in Sardinia, Scotland.
Baffin
Island. No, Baffin Island is up in near Canada.
Oh, right.
And they went to a glacier, and John Glenn took second unit director John Glenn went and filmed it with Rick Sylvester. And he got that gig because there was an advert of him skiing off a mountain, and Rick Sylvester was this daredevil who actually was willing. He goes, "Well, I can show you, I can do this." He goes, he's like this extreme sports geek who did it. It was shot in Sardinia, and of course they built the Bond stage, the 007 stage, which is still in use today.
Oh.
And it's basically the interior of the set, the actual interior of the submarine is actually shot on this tankard and everything else, but it kind of restored the Bond saga to its thing, and it was just a great thing. Marvin Hamlish's story's great, thing's great.
It kind of really I think it really cemented the template, didn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was what, your number 3?
Number 3.
So that's quite big films. I'm trying to think, what was your top? Would one of your top 3, don't say it, involve a whip and a hat? Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I
mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I think this for me, is as near perfection as you can get, and I think you know what it's going to be. But it's Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, there we go.
Which is the first and still the best of the Indiana Jones films. It's as near perfection as you can get. I love it for everything, the performances. It's got the best female sidekick in Karen Allen. It's got a great villain in Paul Freeman as Belloc, who's actually the one. I think he's the one villain who actually plays psychologically on Indy as he does on the amount of times where he sort of outwits him. But here's the thing about the Indiana Jones films: Indy never actually gets anything at the end. If you think about it, every single thing he ever goes after, he never gets.
So he's just foiling things.
No, but if you think about it, it's like,
why is he there?
But he goes after antiquities. So
yeah.
In the first one, it's like he basically is recruited by some government agents to go after the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, okay, right.
At the outset of the film in Peru, he goes after this idol in this temple in Peru with his sidekick Satipo, who's played by Alfred Molina, who basically is a British character actor who has basically done so many great movies over the years. He was in Spider-Man.
He's great.
He was Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
He was in An Education as Carey Mulligan's father. And it was basically a tribute to the cliffhanger series of the 1930s and 40s, so the Republic series. So it was as the story goes, George Lucas went to Hawaii the day after Star Wars opened, when he finished mixing the final mix of Star Wars, and he met up with Steven Spielberg on a beach in Hawaii, and they were constructing a sandcastle. And then
what? They just there to watch.
They were constructing sand, and then basically George Lucas said to him, "Well, what would you like to do next?" And he said, "Well, I'd like to direct James Bond." And at one point, Spielberg was being flagged up to do a James Bond movie, but the Bond producer said, "Well, we're going to see how the shark film does."
Oh, right.
So George Lucas said, "Well, I've actually got something better than Bond." And he said, "This is the birth of Indiana Jones," which was, again, one film that he conceived around the same time as Star Wars. But he said he liked it, but he got so involved with Star Wars because he was also George Lucas was responsible for Apocalypse Now.
In terms of what?
He was responsible for the story behind Apocalypse Now.
Okay.
So he gave the concept to Francis Coppola.
Right, okay.
But what he did was he took some of the motifs in Apocalypse Now he'd written in his script, and then he transferred them to Star Wars.
Oh.
So the rebellion, rebels with Vietnamese as rebels,
yeah,
the Empire as America.
Right, okay.
But there's so much great stuff in this movie. I mean, it's for me the first Raiders actually is one of the most influential adventure films of all time, because when you think of all the Marvel films now and all the production design and everything else you see in them, I mean, you can see them things in today, things like, everything like The Mummy and National Treasure and Romance in the Stone.
Who was Harrison Ford before then? Was he a big thing?
Harrison Ford, well, he'd just come off Star Wars, and if you want, as well, if it had gone a different way, Tom Selleck might well have been Indiana Jones.
Yes.
So this is the story. This is what had happened. Tom Selleck had actually had a very successful audition for Raiders, and he was doing Magnum PI at the time, and CBS refused to let him go. They refused to let him go because Magnum was becoming successful. And then Harrison Ford had actually done, and what it was Spielberg. They were still having trouble casting it. Anyway, George Lucas said, "Well, why don't you go and see Empire Strikes Back?" And when he saw Ford do Han Solo as he was in Empire, they had the thing anyway.
Right.
And funny enough, it's the one role that I don't think anybody else could, strangely enough, I don't think they could reboot it because Harrison Ford is so identified.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, is they're talking about doing a fifth one.
They are.
I don't know how, because, bless him, Harrison Ford is in his...
He wouldn't even be a bit part now,
no,
would he?
He's deaf, and he's not going to be actioning about, and I don't know how... You're right, I don't know how the franchise can really go on without him being a central action-y part of it.
There is a possibility because they can, I think it will be, I think it's going to be the last one anyway. I think, but they can kind of play with some of that idea as well, because if you look at, I think there is a possibility it might be interesting to do, but I think they'll, I think Eastwood tried it similarly with Gran Torino because he kind of played that kind of character, that aging character. And I think that if they do it right,
They just face up to the fact. Like the Terminator, he's old.
He's old, and it does have a for me it's a but I think let's celebrate the fact that he was such an iconic character in the in the first film, and the boulder and the shooting of the Arab on the streets and the visual effects of the Ark and the one of my favorite moments is actually when is in the canyon where Indy has the bazooka and he goes, I'm going to blow up the Ark, Renee, and he goes, okay, you win.
Yeah.
Blow it up. And what's great is about that sequence is that you anticipate that there's going to be a visual effects sequence because you want to see what the art's going to be like to blow up. But then it sort of doubles back. It has one of the best visual gags ever, which is when Ronald Lacey, who's like the evil glass guy with the thing,
the Gestapo guy.
Yeah, the Gestapo guy with the coat hanger.
Yeah,
which starts out like a nunchucker, and then he goes it up like that. But there's also, and of course, it has John Rhys Davies, who was Gimli later on as Salah. His psychic.
Who's Salah?
Salah is his Egyptian psychic.
Oh right, yeah.
His contact and
But it's and there's just a series of great sequences. I mean, the Nepal bar, the drinking session, the shootout in the Nepal bar, the famous desert chase, the fight on the plane, with Pat Roach, who sort of becomes what happens with him, which was choreographed by Vic Armstrong, who was his double. And Vic Armstrong was recruited to work on it because he looked so much like Harrison Ford. Right. And at one point, when he arrived on the set, he went away to get an earlier lunch, and Spielberg was calling, going, Harrison, and then grabbed him by the shoulder and turned him around. He goes, you're not Harrison. He goes, no, I'm not Harrison. He goes, I'm Vic Armstrong. He goes, what are you doing here? He goes, I arrived last night. I'm a stuntman. And he called over the assistant director. He said, this guy looked like Harrison. I thought it was Harrison. He goes, yeah. And there was a famous joke where Harrison Ford said to an interviewer, he said, yeah, we both look alike. He spent 3 weeks with my wife before she realised. So anyway, that's number two.
Hang on, so let me think. So that's quite a big one. I thought you would have peaked at Bond and him. So give us a hint. What year are we now then? What will this one be? Your number one?
Well, okay, so...
Is it recent or are we still...
No, I'm saying, well, I did say to you the Summer Blockbusters from 1975 onwards.
Okay, right.
But bigger than you, the number one over James Bond and Indiana Jones. I don't think it's going. You're not going to say E.T.
No.
Is it obscure or is it quite obvious?
No. It's not obscure.
Are we talking about the one that kick-started it all, basically? The concept. Okay.
So what's gone? What is it?
Jaws.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
So I think you can't... I have to rate this. The reason I picked it as number one is because, A, it is still one of the finest blockbusters of all time. It is the movie that revolutionized cinema going in the world. It was the most watched movie on TV in 1981. It premiered and more people saw it at the time. Yeah. For a while, it was the most watched film on BBC on ITV. And it's... Again, it's a summer movie. It's about a summer. It's about a shark that terrorizes in a summer.
But why do you put that over the other two, the James Bond? What is it?
Well,
is it just for you again?
For me. I mean, I kind of, when I was putting together the list, I kind of felt, well, what criteria would I have to do for the top summer movies? And I think it would be very difficult to exclude Jaws, because I think it's a very grounded movie. I think it works really well. I think it's got great performances. It's a great, it is scary. If you have never seen it before, there's about 5 or 6 genuinely scary movies right from the outset. The music, which we've discussed in the movie soundtrack things.
In terms of the storytelling, you have to be reminded how many times or how much time is spent actually seeing the shark for a film about a shark.
When you think about it, when you think about the whole economy of storytelling in that film, it is so quick and moves very quickly. Yeah. So you have, it's not a movie that kind of there is a suggestion at the outset. I mean, if we didn't know anything about the making of it, we wouldn't have batted an eyelid about the fact that it was a shark that didn't work, or we didn't know it. It's just because, like I said in the movie soundtrack scene, the movie worked, the music and the editing, and the performances, the kind of, a police chief at odds with the locals because he's trying to do a job, and then you've got a mayor who's determined to keep the summer open, and then there's some interesting visual things like, there are little subtle things like, when he's on the phone, and then you have that close up of the actual, the same shark attack. You have that wonderful moment where, just after the kid and the boy is killed, where Roy Scheider's in his study, and he's looking at the pictures and he's going through them, and the wife comes up and goes out, and then he turns around and he goes, where's and they're having a drink, and he goes, well, where's your son? He's sitting in it, and he's sitting at the end of the jetty, and he goes, oh, get out the boat, get out. And then of course she picks up the book, and then there's this picture of a shark biting me. He goes, Michael, would you get out the boat, please? That's what the bus is. Yeah. But it's like the whole thing of the actual monologue that Robert Shaw does about the Indianapolis. That's a really haunting moment.
Yeah, which is I watched it. I watched that a couple of days ago on the clip on YouTube, and that's genuinely the most horrifying thing in the entire film. It's just a dude sat there talking, and it's very calmly. Yeah. He doesn't get emotional necessarily, but like it's haunting sequence.
But I also like the other sequences is when the kid and the boy gets killed, and you have that sequence where it's in medium long shot, and you see the boys being dragged down, and then he gets pulled down, and you see the kid's being pulled down, and there's like blood at the side, and then of course there's the famous trombone shot of Roy Scheider, where
when it comes
which I think which cranks it. I think also it's also very funny at times. I like the for me it's the sequence where Richard Dreyfuss first meets Matt Hooper, and he says, those people in the Fantail launcher, none of them are going to make it out the harbour alive. But I also like the sequence where just after the mother of Alex Kitten has just slapped him, and he's at home and he's drinking it, and then the kids mimicking him as he's drinking his beer.
Right, yeah.
And he goes, and then Richard Dreyfuss comes down, and he sits with he says, "Oh, is anybody eating this and stuff?" And then there's the bit where they cut open the shark, and then there's the number plate. He goes, "He didn't eat a card, did he?" Go, "No, that was dropped in the river." But there's also in terms of the sequence, like the big sign, and they're talking to just after where they go to Ben Gardner's boat, and Richard Dreyfuss is looking at the thing, and they're talking on the actual beach, or the actual grassy thing, and then the camera pulls back, and there's actually on the sign it goes, "Help shark." He goes, "I want those people hung up by best man." He goes, "Mr. Vaughan, would you take a look at that sign? These proportions are correct." But it's just a great series of I think I can't. I probably could look at Raiders, and I could look at Star Wars, and I could look at the Bond movies, but I think if I was going to talk of a singular film or a singular thing like that, it still is above and beyond the. I think that to me is my choice as the.
So what year was that?
1975.
So a bit of an obscure question, but see, I wouldn't go in the river, in the sea now, because in my back of my mind it's sharks. So I can't remember a time when Jaws wasn't there. Were people bothered about sharks before Jaws?
Was sharks a thing back then?
The thing is,
I don't know. I've got an irrational view.
But what it is, it's kind of like Psycho with showers, because after when Psycho was released, people didn't want to take a shower after Psycho. But by the same token, there's but funny enough, there is a comedian when they did Jaws, one of the summer sequels, Jaws: The Revenge, was the 1987 film, which basically was a bit of a thing, but. This is the funny thing about it, is like a comedian pointed it out. I said, "Look, Jaws. I don't understand Jaws: The Revenge. Look, these people, they've had a tough time with these bloody sharks. So what do? To get away from a shark, they go to the beach." And he said, why? They should have moved to Chicago. I mean, let's face it. What the shark's going to do? Is he going to go up to shark and go up in the left? But it's like the. But again, it was so singular because, again, it was coupled with, because of the whole, because it was the first mass success where it was the blockbuster where you had a wide release. You know, the whole idea, because it's also influential because with things like Avengers, you know, Avengers Endgame or Avatar, this whole thing where you release something on 4,000 screens. From 1975 onwards, it was a few hundred screens to start off with. In 1977, for example, The Spy Who Loved Me, for example, was released on like 300 screens in the States. Star Wars, for example, expanded from 32 screens to 43 screens to 100 screens. By the end of the summer, it had been playing in so many times, and it was just that they had to crank out so many prints because they'd done it. The problem is when they got to do the remastering of the special editions, they had a major problem because they'd made so many prints off the original negative that it needed a lot of work. Oh. So the problem is they had to go back to the drawing board. They had to take the original negative. So when Lucas decided to do the 20th anniversary, you know, the prints, they'd use so many, it was like making so many copies of the same film. So, of course, they had to regroup it. Now, with the advent of digital technology, they were able to redo it and then remaster it, which is why today with the digital intermediate stuff, the fact that they can remaster things and include it. And they did it when they celebrated the 100th anniversary of Universal, they went back to redo Jaws. Jaws was one of those movies that they remastered. So when you watch it on ITV4, you're actually watching the remastered version. Okay. When you watch the Bond movies on ITV4, if you're at the very end of the film, they always say the digital restoration by Lowry.
You know, I do notice that sometimes.
Yeah.
With the old film.
So the thing about it is they do. So what when the film was first released on TV, it was like 4:3 pan and scan. So you were watching it from a direct copy of the 35mm print. So they, again, the labs they did films like The Sting was another one. There's a whole load of them which they did as special editions for the 100th anniversary of Universal because they kind of picked maybe 13 titles. But that's the whole thing. It was like, and interesting enough, like with Jurassic Park, they put a warning on the bottom of the poster for Jaws when it was first released in the UK in 1975. Some scenes may be intense for younger children.
Oh, okay.
But when they reissued it, they actually had to upgrade it to a 12A rather than an A, because it was an A in 1975.
Yeah.
Because there was only U, A, AA, and X. So there's so much about that film that I think, you know, I could watch that again and again and again. I mean, it doesn't scare me. It doesn't scare me anymore. But it's just great to have. It's like something like a CD. You watch it on TV and it's great. And
it's an incredibly well made film.
Yeah. That's it.
And that's the thing. Yeah. And from a director's point of view, it's an incredibly well made film because it's because in the different directors' hands, it could be fairly trashy kind of film.
Well,
the fact that there's hundreds of knockoffs about a monster, about whatever that that's out there that didn't do it anywhere near as good. Just shows like that really. I think the Spielberg and
perfect,
but music, the tension of it all,
But the funny thing is the original novel.
It was a novel.
There was a novel. Peter Benchley. It was.
How did that work?
Richard Zanuck and David Brown sort of in 1973-74 first heard of the book, and it was in galley form at the time, which is like a pre-release thing.
Right.
And they snapped up the rights for it.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, in the book, Matt Hooper, the Richard Dreyfuss character, has an affair with Brody's wife.
No.
In the book, what they did was they stripped back the story to make it more like a Shark Tale.
Yeah.
Stuff. And also, it's the Quint story. So. The book itself, I think, is not as they did some very clever things with the adaptation. They made it a bit more like a monster movie, like a real seafaring story.
Yeah.
But the Quint story, I think in the book it's more about Quint's obsession with a shark. It kind of becomes like his folly. He goes after this shark because he has to. It's not a story like, I mean, it opens with the killing of the girl in the book. In the book, it opens with the killing of the girl, but like with most things with novels, the subtext changes. You know, if you read certain novels, it's like, so I think it works better. It works much better as a film.
Have you read the book?
Yeah.
What's the point of putting that story in about the affair? What does that do? Surely that
they eliminate.
derails.
No, that was what Benchley wrote.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But what? Why would you have that in the story of the Jaws?
No, because in the novel, there's like you can do more. You can actually do more in a novel.
But it seems quite off of the topic to have. Oh,
well, it was one of those.
So does he know? Do they find out? Is that part of the story?
I don't think he does. I think that's just
unless it's just to make him a bastard or her.
Yeah, but it would have got in the way of what the story was about, which is about a shark terrorizing. But Penchley's original idea was what would happen if a shark terrorized a small town.
Right.
And luckily they saw the galley form and they bought the rights and the rest.
I watched something about the making of Jaws this last year, and it's interesting. If you watch it now, they said there was a one take deal that they left in the film. Do you know what it is? Do you have a guess? There's one bit in the film that was so good, and it's accidental, so they left it in. It's the bit where the woman's been pulled underneath the water, and she gets pulled, and she looks around, and then she gets pulled again. Do you remember that bit? Well, there's a bit in it where there's a woman, I can't remember what's around it, but she's in there. I think it's at night time, and she gets pulled, and she tugs, and she goes down and comes up, and she gets pulled again. Well, when they filmed that, the woman was saying that when they pulled her, they had a guy underneath to pull her down. She wasn't ready. So he pulled her down. She said, I got a gulp of water, and then came up and said, I'm trying to breathe, and he pulled me back down again.
Yeah.
And when you watch it, you're watching somebody drown, and you watch it. That's not acting, man. Like when you see her face.
Well, that was Spielberg who did that.
Did what?
Spielberg pulled her down
Himself?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That's the famous story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because she said she was screaming at them because she wasn't ready.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing: is funny enough, when Alan Rickman filmed his death in Die Hard.
No.
Well, there's a scene at the end of Die Hard.
Oh, you mean
when Alan Rickman falls down? The same thing again. They said, we're going to do it on 1, 2, 3, on 3.
Right.
Well, they did it on 2. So this, the scene when you see his face, that's actually that's a genuine thing because they'd actually done the same thing again.
Right.
So again, the famous story is Spielberg did that. He actually pulled her down under the water because that's what he wanted to get the thing. So
it was not so, but I feel bad because like with The Exorcist when they talk about the woman when she gets pulled down towards the cupboard and she fucks her back up, and she said she was fucking screaming everything at them because she really got slammed.
Because again, that was the same thing again. The actual because the physical thing where
because she was saying be careful, and so the director said to the guy, fucking let her have it, like really fucking, and he fucked her up. But the girl on the bed as well, pulling her up down, she said it came loose and it was fucking up her back as she was going up and down.
Well, going back to The Exorcist, Friedkin actually talked about this about the priest when Father Karras is laying on the ground.
Yeah.
And apparently what he did was he actually slapped him. He said, look, he did a genuine thing where he did like he said, do you trust me? Do you trust me? And he went bam. Yeah. And it's like
he said he cried. Cried.
And also as well, it's like with I think Friedkin did the same thing where he had an argument with Gene Hackman on the set of The French Connection where there's a scene where he's standing outside the restaurant going after Charnier and he's doing like the hands, he's going he's doing like the things and he's grabbing the hands like that and he's going like, I want you to look like you're effing cold and stuff like that. And Hackman couldn't do it. So, but those are the kind of things where, there's a lot of things where, if you go back to Raiders, for example, the shooting of the Arab, that was an accident. That was a total improvised situation because Spielberg was determined to get out. Yeah. And they had this wonderfully choreographed sword fight between Indy and the Arab. And basically everybody was losing it. And so the accounts of the accounts of how whoever came up with this is actually weird. But Spielberg wanted out. He wanted out of the shoot. He goes, look, you've only got 2 hours because that's it. So they said, well, and then Harrison Ford's on the way. He said, well, look, we could save ourselves a lot of time if we do this. And when they got to the set, Harrison Ford said to Spielberg, although different, he said, well, why don't we just shoot him?
No.
And then basically the whole thing, because again, it's a scene where you're expecting this big fight, and then all of a sudden, but then all of a sudden he takes out the gun and shoots it. And then of course there's a running gag in Temple of Doom where he sees the 2 thuggies, and then of course he tries to go into that, and of course he doesn't have the actual gun in his holster. So yeah, no, there's some interesting. I mean, the funny thing is nowadays we look at the technicalities of Jaws. We look at the fact that it was a mechanical shot that didn't work because we're more astute about what's happened. There's a great book called The Making of Jaws by Matt Taylor, which has a lot of great pictures in it. Cole Gottlieb did the Jaws Diary, which is a Jaws journal, which is a really great book, which is a paperback book, where he talks about the about the whole thing and about the fact that Roy Scheider cracked at one point because the food was awful. But
and the cameras, they said they were so new to things that they didn't realise that the salt water was going to fuck up the cameras, and they didn't.
At one point, when the Orca sank, apparently the camera, a really expensive camera, sank to the bottom of it, and then what they had to do was they had to actually keep it in water and then take it to the labs, right? And miraculously, not a single frame was hurt.
Bloody hell.
So it was like but if you read Carl Gottlieb's book, The Jaws Diary, it's a really great book. It's in the whole history of it, and he gives a whole diary. It's good. And then, as I say, Matt Taylor, there's a really nice coffee table book with a lot of images, and Spielberg's written a really nice introduction to that. But it talks about, there's a map of where they shot the scenes in Martha's Vineyard, where the beach was. There's about 7 or 8 locations that they use and stuff. So those are two great jobs.
That's a good set of choices. Charles, anything from your memory, the summer blockbusters that rings a bell with you? Anything?
Yeah, I suppose my heyday was the 90s.
Right.
So,
what was the summers in the 90s?
I suppose Jurassic Park.
Oh, right. That's quite late, yeah.
Toy Story, I think, was a summer one. Toy Story 1.
Right, we're going downhill now.
Yeah.
Grabbing at straws.
Lion King.
Oh, yeah. Well, in the podcast legs.
All the good ones. Saving Private Ryan.
Was that a summer release?
I think so, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, that could have been on the list, or I think you could have put that on the list. So there you go.
That feel-good summer movie. Saving Private Ryan.
We end on that. Toy Story and Saving Private Ryan. Toy Story 4. Have you seen anything about it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Is that getting kicked around, or is it a good thing, or is it a bad thing?
No, it's great. No, it's a great film. I mean, Toy Story 4 is really good. I liked it. I saw it yesterday.
Oh, you saw it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you'd seen the Avengers last time we met.
I saw it. Yeah.
So, what's your critique?
My bladder survived.
Oh. Are you going with the rest of the crowd and saying it's magnificent? And
well, the only thing I find about the Avengers films, and no spoilers there, is I just think they should have done it as 2 movies. I think it should have been Endgame Part 1 and Endgame Part 2.
But then would have people complained?
No, I think if they... No, my biggest problem is, and you'll see why when you watch it, is that, when you think of all the characters that have inhabited the Marvel Universe, the climax was, I felt, was a little bit like a little bit rushed. Okay. I kind of felt that there were so many great characters used, and I quite like all of them in there. But the funny thing is it kind of... It was great. I mean, I think if you like the Marvel movies, you're going to like this one, and I think that's really what I was. That's what I kind of was buying from the reviews. Everybody was saying, "Oh, this is fantastic and it's great." I don't think it's the best. I'm not disputing it. I don't think it's the best of the. I think Captain Marvel, I think, is great. I like Captain Marvel.
I didn't think it was better. I think Infinity War is better.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think Endgame was. And I think also it's kind of like, because you've been watching so many movies with so many coders, and I mean, I actually, when I left the cinema, I said, "Is there a coder at the end of this one?" Because they said, "No, there isn't." It's like because it was kind of like the end of the chapter, because you've got Spider-Man: Far From Home, which is coming out soon, which I think is on in July, and then you've got like. But it'll be interesting to see, because they may have to rethink it, because I think X-Men Dark Phoenix has kind of gone down like a lead balloon.
Yes.
Is there any of any of the Avengers that haven't had an origin story, or is there any room there for?
Well, you can always there's tons of people who have been an Avenger, and there's tons of unused characters. I mean, they can always dig people out.
All right, now think about it. Is there any that have had an origin story of the Avengers? Iron Man hasn't, has he? Thor has.
Iron Man
has. Captain America, yeah.
Yeah, Iron Man, Captain America,
Captain Marvel.
Thor's had one. The Hulk's had one. Well, he's had more bloody origin stories than anything because you had the bouncing ball Eric Bana one, which was the one where it kept bouncing around which was not great.
Oh, the Ang Lee one.
You had the Edward Norton one, the Incredible Hulk, which kind of was, and then of course you've got and then you've got the Mark Ruffalo one as well.
Right, yeah.
But I think it's such a cash cow now that I think in like the Bond movies, you're half expecting, you're wondering when the next one's going to happen. I think.
Yeah.
Oh, very much so. And they're talking about maybe doing a Savage Avengers or something like that. So,
and I think that what I understand is I think Brie Larson, the Captain Marvel, is going to be the next. Is like Iron Man before. Is going to be the next thing. But I think part of the reason is because the contracts of a lot of the people who've played this. From what story I heard is apparently Robert Downey Jr. wanted an incredible amount of money for two of these films for the Infinity War. But that's the thing. It's like they're comic book characters and they're reusable. They're recyclable. They are.
Especially as in the comics, the last couple of years they have been. What they're called legacy characters, they have been getting rid of and experimenting with changing, like they got rid of Captain America, they got rid of Iron Man, they got rid of the Hulk, and they brought in younger, different versions.
Right, yeah.
So they have been basically they've been sort of writing stories and experimenting with effectively replacing them with an eye, I think, to the MCU.
What we got coming out this summer then? That hasn't already come out. Have we got any left? When's Terminator, whatever it is, 6? When's that out?
I think September, August.
August.
Yeah, October.
But there's the rebooted Lion King, which is the brand new one, which is like the Jungle Book, the CGI real life thing where they're using the
same story.
A bit like Aladdin and stuff.
Is Aladdin out yet?
Aladdin's out, yeah.
So what's happened with that? Because that was getting trounced because of Will Smith or something.
How else that done at the box office? Done okay?
It's done okay. I mean, people like it, but they don't think. I think because Robin Williams is such a. Because Robin Williams is so defining as a character anyway.
So what films have we got coming out left?
Spider-Man.
They're all out.
About it, really.
Yeah.
Child's Play. Really?
Child's Play's out.
Is that out?
There's a brand new animated thing called The Queen's Corgi from the makers of Romeo and Juliet, which is kind of.
I've seen the things in the tube.
Yeah, it's like it's Jack. I think from what I understand, you've got like Jack Whitehall voicing the Queen's Corgi, and you've got like I think Prince Philip and the Queen voiced by Tom Courtenay and Julie Walters. Because you can kind of predict who's doing the voice for what. Because Julie Walters is kind of like, you think, she's doing that.
So what's because the next time we see you, I'm thinking is Halloween for the my time of the year. This is what I've been building up with John up to the Halloween horror films. Anything going on between then?
Well, there's Fright Fest in August.
That's in August.
Yeah, Fright Fest in August, late August. And there's a whole host of other.
So what is Fright Fest exactly?
Fright Fest is a very popular horror film festival which has been going for 20 years. It's celebrating its 20th anniversary.
And is it independent? What's their USP?
It started at the Prince Charles Cinema in 2000. And what it is it's a great opportunity for horror directors and filmmakers to showcase their work. There's a lot of, some great movies have been played over the years. I mean, Hellboy was one of the big films.
Okay.
Land of the Dead.
Yeah.
Land of the Dead, George A. Romero.
Okay.
I Spit on Your Grave. They've done things like.
But they're releasing the films at this time.
No. Fright Fest is different. Fright Fest is actually an opportunity for showcasing. It's a festival where you get a chance to watch about 24 or 25 films.
So like Cannes, is that sort of?
It's a showcase for all the genre stuff. So they've just announced the program for this year. And it's not just a film festival. It's a community of fans, and they go to the Cineworld in Leicester Square. It was originally the Prince Charles Cinema, then it was the Odeon West End, then it became the Empire in the Screen One, and I did a thing called the sleepy queue where you actually queued overnight for about 17 hours. So you queued out, and then you spent 17 hours outside the cinema, and then literally in the morning you would go and get your tickets for your pass. And then you'd exchange it for your lanyard when you arrive at the thing. You just buy the ticket. It's like £195.
Cool.
And if you stayed the night, they actually used to reward you with a bonus of a film at the Prince Charles. So you go and watch a movie there.
Okay, right.
But it's I mean, I've got a lot of friends there, and Paul, Ian, and Jack, and Paul, Ian, and Alan and Greg, who run the festival, do a really great job, and they reckon that there's a really nice lineup. There's a really great lineup for this year.
So it's every year, the Fright Fest?
Every year for Fright Fest.
What did you see last year?
God, what am I remembering? Oh God, I can't remember now.
What have you seen? What good films have you seen there that come out?
I saw the remake of Leatherface, which was shot in Romania of all places, and I did some reviews for that one. I met this British actress Vanessa Grass, who was in this thing called It Came from the Desert, which was about giant ants, a bit like them and stuff. One of my favourite films of all time from the festival over the last few years has been Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Oh, that's fun.
Okay. So, in a nutshell, the story is basically in the traditional Friday the 13th and stuff like that. It's normally a bunch of teens going off to the woods, and then you have locals who are basically.
I think you got it right the first time.
Yeah,
yokels.
Yeah. So they basically terrorize the teens.
Yeah.
The difference between this one is actually the yokels are the good guys, and the teens are the bad guys.
It is an original story.
And there's some great scenes, like the scene where, for example, Tucker, he's actually sort of chops through some wood, and he chops into like a beehive, and then of course he's driving and he's
with a chainsaw.
and then of course there's but the standout sequence for me is the sequence where one of the teens sort of accidentally falls into the wood chipper.
Oh right, yeah, the legs.
And he's pulling the thing out, and then the police chief turns up, and they've got like then you've got like the legs culling out like that. But again, it's like the and I do remember that tested really, really well. I mean, we all came out of the screening just loving it, and we loved it. I mean, that had the best reaction for a horror film, I think, since The Evil Dead.
It had that sort of thing to it.
Mix of horror.
So we're probably going to see you for Fright Fest, and we'll come up with something for that time and for the Halloween. But, so when's that? When is that? End of August, you said?
Halloween's Fright Fest. Fright Fest is the late August bank holiday.
Oh, okay, it's bank holiday.
And also they do a Halloween Fright Fest, which is a day, all-dayer. So they do like 6 films.
Okay.
But they did an all-nighter. But the problem is with all-nighters, you normally fall asleep around 3 o'clock. It's not... It's not very bad. I mean,
it becomes a bit of a slog, doesn't it?
Seems like it's not that good an idea as it was sort of like in the afternoon.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen. Thanks for coming on. It's been very interesting as always, and probably
you.
See you for Fright Fest then.
Cheers.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, sorry, I was about to blow a kidney. I felt like Grandpa Simpson.
You just started to zone out.
I was going to the far away place, the other place. I was just like, I was at that point. I was like, yeah, like seriously.